we're going to talk about how you can begin to share your personal story without offending anyone, without hurting anybody's feelings. Look, ever since you were born, you've been writing your own story. And there's going to come a time, and maybe it's right now if you're watching this, I'm sure it is, where you're going to want to start to help more people by sharing your personal hardships and how you got through them, right? But what happens then, what holds a lot of people back, and this is why I'm creating this episode today, is because people are like, Jamie, how do I share my story? So many other people were involved. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want them to feel guilty. I don't want them to feel bad about how they treated me. How can I share this in a way that's empowering and inspiring to others, but doesn't throw rocks at people that I still love and care about or who have affected me on this journey? Like, how can I share these really intimate experiences in my life that had some hardship without throwing other people under the bus? And so that's really the idea of this episode. So by the end of it, I hope that you feel confident about sharing your story, and you have some tips and tricks that are going to help you make sure that you can share from your heart, but also not hurt people that you love. So let's get into it. So this episode is inspired by many of my clients who have come to me and they've said, you know what, Jamie, I want to share my story. I know I need to. I feel called to do it. But how on earth am I going to share this? Anything from infidelity to abuse to sexual trauma to bullying. How am I going to share this without hurting the person who hurt me in that time? Look at how amazing you humans are. You don't want to hurt someone by sharing your version of the story when they hurt you. That's why I love you, and I love you for listening to this right now, because the world needs to hear your message. Okay, and so I'm going to help you do that without causing harm to others, because I know you have such a beautiful heart to be here listening to me today. So this really was mainly inspired, though, by one specific client conversation that I had with my client. Gosh, he was just talking. He's like, I've got this insane story. I've got this incredible story, and I know I've spoken from stages in front of thousands of people, and I've had standing ovations of people so honored and inspired to just hear this story. And he's like, and now I'm freezing. Now I'm freezing about this one story that I know would change a lot of lives. And I'm too scared to do it. And I know that this could resonate with you, but other times what I've heard is, gosh, I've stayed quiet ever since I was young because I didn't think I had a story to tell. If I did have a story to tell, who would listen to me versus you versus anybody else? Why me? Why would someone listen to me? And so what I want to start with is just clearing that one right away. You have a story because you've gone through a very specific event in your life that has transformed you in some way. And finding the lesson inside of that thing is what could potentially change somebody else's life. And so that's what I really want to focus on. So whether or not you feel like you have a story to tell, you do, and you believe that, at least a part of you does, or you would never have chosen this to be listening to right now. So you know you do. So now we just have to overcome your fears so that you can move forward and share it effectively. So what might be holding you back right now? Well, what I want to start with is I want to ask you a simple question. If you started sharing your story, what is the worst thing that could happen? Get clear with yourself. What is the worst thing that would happen if you started opening up and you shared what you really feel called to share in your heart right now? Are you worried people would laugh at you? People would judge you, you'd lose friends. Maybe people would say, haha, like I told you so, she's like full of shit. What are you worried about? Okay, so choose the worst thing that you feel like would happen to you. Now, if this has anything to do with other people, are these people that are actually in your close group of friends or family right now? Are they in your top 5? If the answer is no, and these are people who you've ruled out of your life since freaking middle school or high school, then why the fuck do you care what they think? If these are people that are not close to you anyway and would not be cheerleading and rooting for you, then why do you care what they would think? Because what's interesting is, let's say we showed up anyway. And sure, we might have some people hating us. We might have the internet who starts slamming us. It's okay. But you think there also could be the other side of people who are actually rooting for you? They're cheering you on. They're inspired. They're motivated by the words that you say, and they want to do more with their life. They're inspired to start sharing their story, all because they heard you share yours. Could there be the other side? Of course. Yeah. And so this fear, this insecurity that you have that's keeping you from even starting to share your story. is preventing you from being on purpose. It's preventing you from finding your voice and attracting your tribe to you. Do you see that? Look, I didn't speak up about my story for years. In fact, when I started my podcast, it was really just a platform for me to just share and like really use it as a personal journal for myself. I had never, ever, ever shared my story. And then when I started getting interviewed on other people's podcasts, I was like, I hope I answered that okay. And what begins to happen over time and from practice, right? Look, I'm just at the beginning of my journey too, okay? But what I've noticed is when I'm being interviewed now, my answers get more punchy. I get more specific. I know which stories from my past pack the most punch and the most lessons within them that the listener could take away from them, right? So you start to know, but you don't know that until you just start talking about it, until your stories get better, until you learn how to captivate more emotion in them, right? That's the power of this, right? But it all starts with overcoming your fears. And all of that will start with understanding the worst case scenario of sharing your story super authentic and vulnerably. And many times that fear actually isn't that freaking bad. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to eliminate that fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of success, whatever the thing is that's bubbling up to the surface right now for you, we have to eliminate that. Eliminate that fear. Evaluate the relevance of the relationships of the people that you're worried about harming, right? Okay, so here's the interesting thing. Let's say that you were in a relationship with someone who was abusive towards you, and you feel like there's so much pack in that story that could help someone else who's in a similar situation. We're not going to go in there and throw rocks at the abuser. That's not what this is about. That's coming from a place of being wounded. That's coming from a place of trying to hurt them. What we need to do instead is look at that scenario and say, okay, what was the ultimate lesson that I took away from that experience? If I was sitting next to someone right now who was in a similar situation, what could I say to them to help them feel connected to me, to help them trust me, to help them understand that I know how to help them, and to help them move forward? That's it. We don't need to even talk about who it was. We shouldn't include any names. We don't need to. It's not necessary. Because that's not what this is about. That's not what this is for. What's super interesting too is while you might not be sharing this because you're worried it's going to affect your relationship with your mom or your dad or your cousin or your brother or your sister or your ex-fiance or your ex-husband, whatever, the interesting thing is a lot of times when we begin to share this story, they come closer to us. Those who are meant to be, right? They're like, I never realized that was your perspective. I didn't understand that that's what you were going through in that moment. I never knew your side of the story. Like, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate you, right? It brings them closer to you. And so what you think right now is going to pull you further apart could actually be the thing that brings you closer together. Interesting, right? So I want to introduce the concept of the hero's journey. This is by Joseph Campbell. So the hero's journey speaks a lot about two journeys that you'll go on. One is the journey of achievement. This is making the multiple seven figures, having the nice house, the beautiful car, the lavish vacations, the gorgeous family. Like, that's the journey of achievement. That's a lot of times what other people see. And that's what they see in your 3D reality, okay? That's not entirely what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about sharing that achievement status in your story. What I'm talking about is the other journey. This is the journey of transformation. This is what's happening behind the scenes that leads to those external measures of success, that journey of achievement, right? And so when it comes to sharing your story, if you're focused on the journey of transformation and how you transformed, that's where everything begins to shift for you. That's where you're now taking them on this journey. It's like you're going back to the beginning, back to the birthing of your story. And you're saying, this is where I started. This was all the stuff that I went through. And now here I am because of that, because I pulled the lessons out of the messiness. So really what I want to emphasize here is the importance of reflecting on your personal backstories and your journeys of transformation versus that of achievement. So this is wild. This was when my client had a really big like aha moment and epiphany, is when I talked about shifting from the losses inside of your story to the wisdom gained through the experiences within the loss. Or maybe it wasn't a loss, maybe it was a lesson. It was like, take your whole life, pull out the biggest lessons that you've ever had. Talk about those and the wisdom that you gained from those things that helped you in your days to come, that helped you in your life to come after that. Right? That's what we want to pull out of there. The wisdom gained from the lesson. Right? It's when we get too hung up on the lesson itself and we're too much in our emotional bodies, or maybe we're still angry or annoyed or upset at a specific situation that happened in our past. That's where it's still an open wound, right? Like if you've got this wound on your shoulder here, on your arm, and it's still open, it might be a little bit too soon to talk about it, right? Maybe you would still shed some tears about it. Maybe you're still angry or upset. That's an open wound. Those, a lot of times, we're just not ready to share. And that's okay. You don't have to share stuff that you're not ready to share. There's plenty of other stuff in your life that's happened that you can share, right? And so what I encourage you to look for are the scars. What's healed in your life, and maybe it's left a scar, but you've learned from it, right? You have that scar to show, that wound, so you didn't forget about it. It's still there, but you've healed from it. That's the stuff to start with. Okay, so what would be helpful right now is if you have a pen and paper, you write down a few of those moments. A few of those moments and lessons in your life that you gain a lot of wisdom from that have left you with a couple scars. It's a great place to start. Now, another question that I get frequently is, Jamie, how am I supposed to film all of this in one sitting? Let alone if you're trying to put it in an Instagram reel or a YouTube short, how am I supposed to make this 60 or 90 seconds long? The truth is, you're not. You're not. I would encourage you to sit down with your cell phone, have an idea of that scar that you want to talk about, and don't constrain yourself with time. I don't know how long this episode is going to be right now. My average time to be finished with a riff is around 15 minutes, so I'd imagine 15. But it could be 5, it could be 25, it could be 45, it doesn't matter. It could be 3 minutes. You'll know when you feel complete because you'll feel complete. Just let it be enough. So don't worry about the time. Sit down. Film what comes through. Focus on the lesson learned from the loss or the lesson. Don't throw rocks at other people. Don't even bring up their name. And you can also fully say, look, to be totally transparent, this is how I viewed the story. This is how it affected me. There's another side to it. You guys can go and seek that if you want to, but this is my experience and this is what I took away from it. And there's nothing wrong from that. It's gonna magnetize people to you in ways that you can't imagine until you just start, right? So there's so much importance in sharing your personal story. It's different than mine. It's different than your neighbors. It's different than your brothers, your mothers, your sisters, your cousins. It's different because you're different and you've had different life experiences. And so it's up to you to share that, because if you don't hit the mic, if you don't click record, nobody else could have the experience to learn from you and your lessons. So maybe they've gone through the exact same situation and they still have a very open wound and they have no idea what they're going to do about it. But them just watching you and hearing how you pulled the lesson out of that thing could be enough to change the trajectory of their life. Because they now too can pull the lesson out of that thing and they can grow from it. So embrace transparency. Focus on the wisdom. And if you're enjoying this content, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. I love sharing topics like this that are just going to help you own your life, own your work, and take control to get your message out into the world to those who need to hear it. So thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.